The Galactic Council Chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of silver and light that orbited the neutral world below. Inside its great hall, representatives from 300 species gathered in their pods, each one suspended in the air by technology so old that nobody remembered who invented it first. The chamber hummed with translation devices, turning thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Taiyang Park sat in the human delegation pod, watching the chaos unfold before him. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a dying world. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. Millions of voices cried out for help before falling silent. The Qualari homeworld was being consumed, and the council could do nothing but watch. High Chancellor Rickstow stood at the central podium, his feathers ruffled with distress. The avian leader had governed the council for 30 years, and in all that time he had never faced anything like this. The Vorn Collective had appeared without warning, emerging from the dark spaces between stars where no one ever traveled. Their ships were nightmares of organic metal, growing and shifting like living things. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path. "We must send diplomats," insisted the Draven representative, a crystalline being whose voice rang like bells. "All species can be reasoned with. We must try to understand what they want." "What they want is obvious," snapped the Kelter ambassador, his scales flashing red with anger. "They want to eat us all." The Qualari sent 17 diplomatic missions. None returned. The argument had been going in circles for 3 hours. Taiyang listened patiently, his hands folded on the console before him. Beside him, his aide whispered nervous updates about the Qualari death toll. 600 million dead. 700 million. The numbers climbed with horrifying speed. "Perhaps we could offer them resources," suggested another voice. "Uninhabited worlds, mineral rights, anything to make them leave the Qualari alone." "They are taking resources," Rickstow said quietly. "They are taking the Qualari themselves. Our sensors show the enemy ships processing biological matter. They are turning people into fuel." Silence fell across the chamber. For species that had not known war in 2 centuries, the concept was almost impossible to grasp. The Council had exploration fleets, research vessels, and ships with light defensive weapons to handle pirates and accidents. But none of them had ever been designed to fight a real enemy. "The Qualari have perhaps 48 hours, Rickstow continued. "Their orbital defenses are gone. Their cities are defenseless. If we do nothing, an entire species will cease to exist." He turned slowly, his large eyes scanning the assembled delegates. "Does anyone have the capability to help them?" More silence. A few species had larger ships, better shields, faster engines. But weapons? Real weapons meant to kill? No one had bothered to develop such things. Why would they? The galaxy was at peace. Finally, Rickstow's gaze fell on the human pod. Taiyang felt the weight of 300 species watching him. Humanity had joined the Council only 15 years ago, barely emerging from their own solar system. They were newcomers, primitives really, still figuring out how to navigate galactic politics. Most species saw them as harmless, perhaps a bit aggressive in their trading practices, but ultimately irrelevant. "Ambassador Park," Rickstow said, his tone almost apologetic, "can Earth contribute anything to a peacekeeping mission? Perhaps medical supplies or refugee transport?" Taiyang stood slowly. He was a small man by human standards, wearing a simple gray suit that looked plain compared to the exotic clothing of other delegates. He had served as Earth's ambassador for 5 years, and in that time he had learned to be patient. The Council thought they knew humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "High Chancellor," Taiyang said calmly, "we can contribute everything." Before anyone could respond, he entered a code into his console. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered and changed. The image of the dying Kalari world vanished, replaced by sensor data that made no sense to most of the delegates watching. Hundreds of contacts appeared on the display, massive energy signatures dropping into normal space throughout the sector. The Council's computers struggled to classify them, throwing up error messages and contradictory readings. The ships were huge, far larger than anything the Council had ever built. They were angular and brutal, covered in armor plating that absorbed active scans. And they were armed. What is this? Rickstall demanded, his feathers standing straight up in alarm. What are we seeing? A new voice filled the chamber, deep and calm. This is Fleet Admiral Do-Yoon of the Human Defense Force, broadcasting from the carrier Eternal Vigil. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet has arrived in response to the Quailari distress call. We are ready to provide military assistance. The display zoomed in on one of the contacts. A ship appeared, so massive that it dwarfed the council chamber itself. The hull was dark gray, covered in weapon ports and launch bays. Smaller ships swarmed around it like insects, each one bristling with missiles and guns. Military assistance? Rickstall repeated, his voice rising. Ambassador Park, what is the meaning of this? How many ships does humanity have? Tai Yang pulled up another display. The numbers appeared in the air for everyone to see. The 3rd Fleet consists of 47 capital ships, 300 destroyers, and 2,100 strike craft. It is one of 7 such fleets currently active in the Human Defense Force. The council erupted. Delegates shouted in hundreds of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up. Some species were terrified. Others were angry. A few were simply confused. Humanity had hidden this from them. For 15 years, Earth had sat quietly in its little corner of space, while building an armada that could conquer half the galaxy. Why? Rickstall shouted over the noise. Why does humanity have so many weapons? The galaxy is at peace. Another voice cut through the chaos. This one came from one of the massive ships on the display. This is Captain Jisoo Kim of the Dreadnought Indomitable. Permission to address the council? Rickstall looked like he wanted to refuse, but he nodded anyway. The display shifted again, showing a human woman in a dark uniform. She stood on what was clearly a warship's bridge, surrounded by tactical displays and weapon consoles. High Chancellor, Jisoo said, her voice respectful but firm. You say the galaxy is at peace. Your galaxy is at peace. Ours never was. What does that mean? Demanded a delegate from the Pelian Empire. It means, Jisoo continued, that humanity evolved differently than you did. Your species developed on safe worlds with few predators and fewer threats. You reached the stars through cooperation and peace. We respect that. But humans come from a different kind of world. She gestured, and images appeared alongside her. Scenes from Earth's history, carefully selected to make the point. Ancient battles, medieval wars, industrial conflicts, nuclear weapons, and finally, the great space battles that humans had fought against each other before unifying. We have been fighting for our entire existence, Jisoo said quietly. We fought nature, we fought each other. We fought for every scrap of survival. It made us very good at one thing. It made us very good at war. This is barbaric, someone shouted. Yes, Taiyang agreed, speaking up from his pod. It is. We are not proud of our history. But we learned from it. We learned how to build weapons, how to fight, how to survive against enemies that wanted to destroy us completely. And now the Quailari face such an enemy that cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with, an enemy that must be fought. Rickstall's wings trembled. And you want permission to fight them? We want permission to save the Quailari, Taiyang corrected. The fight is just the method. The council chamber fell silent. On the display, the human fleet waited, thousands of ships hovering in the darkness like predators ready to strike. The Qualari homeworld continued to burn, its people dying by the millions. And the Vorn collective continued their feast, unaware that something was coming for them. Something they had never encountered before. Something that knew how to kill. The debate lasted another hour, but everyone knew how it would end. The Qualari were dying, and only humanity had the power to save them. High Chancellor Riksdal finally gave his authorization, though his feathers remained ruffled with anxiety. He also insisted that council observer ships accompany the human fleet to monitor their actions. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone understood. The council was afraid of what Earth's warships might actually do. Ambassador Taiyan accepted the terms without argument. He sent the authorization code to Fleet Admiral Do Yun, and the human ships began their jump to the Qualari system. The council observers scrambled to keep up, their exploration vessels struggling to match the speed and precision of human military drives. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Jisoo Kim stood on her bridge and watched the stars stretch into lines as they entered slipspace. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency around her, checking weapon systems and plotting attack vectors. She had commanded this ship for 6 years, and her crew trusted her completely. They would need that trust in the hours ahead. "Status report," she ordered. Commander Hyan Lee looked up from his tactical console. "All ships have successfully entered slipspace. We will arrive at the Qualari system in 40 minutes. The Third Fleet is at full combat readiness." Jisoo nodded. Around the bridge, her officers continued their preparations. Lieutenant Nari Song monitored communications, coordinating with other ships in the fleet. Chief Engineer Jung-ho Nam watched the engine readouts like a hawk, making tiny adjustments to keep their reactor running at peak efficiency. Every person on board knew their job and did it well. "Captain," Nari said, "we are receiving updated intelligence from Qualari system. The situation is worse than we thought." A holographic display appeared above Jisoo's command chair. The Qualari system materialized in miniature, and the sight made even her experienced crew fall silent. The enemy had consumed 2 of Qualari's 3 moons. Their ships were everywhere, thousands of them, ranging from small fighters to massive factory vessels that blotted out the sun. On the planet's surface, the Vorn were processing entire cities, turning buildings and people into raw materials. "How many?" Jisoo asked. "Preliminary count shows over 3,000 enemy vessels," Hyan reported. "They outnumber us 6 to 1. Someone on the bridge muttered a curse. Jisoo did not reprimand them. 6 to 1 were bad odds by any measure. But she had fought worse. They all had. "The enemy does not fight like we do," she said, her voice carrying to every station on the bridge. "They rely on numbers and regeneration. They have never faced coordinated military resistance. That is their weakness." She pulled up the tactical plan that Fleet Admiral Do Yun had transmitted. The Third Fleet would divide into 3 battle groups. The carriers would hang back and launch their strike craft to control the space above the planet. The destroyers would form a screen and eliminate the smaller enemy ships. And the capital ships, the dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, would punch through to the factory vessels and destroy them completely. "It will be a knife fight," Hyan observed quietly. "Yes," Jisoo agreed. "But we brought very sharp knives." On the other council observer ships, the alien crews watched their sensors with growing confusion and fear. The human vessels moved with a precision that seemed impossible. Every ship knew exactly where it needed to be. Every weapon system was already locked onto targets that had not yet appeared. The humans were not preparing for battle. They were already fighting it in their minds. One of the observers, a Valine engineer named Kresh, spoke to his captain. "How do they do it?" How do they coordinate so perfectly? They practice, his captain replied, her voice quiet. They practice war like we practice art. The fleet dropped out of slipspace in perfect formation, arriving at the edge of the Quillari system, with timing measured in microseconds. For a moment, everything was still. The human ships hung in space, dark and silent. The Vorn collective continued their feast on the planet below, unaware that anything had changed. Then Fleet Admiral Doyun gave the order that would define the next 7 hours. All ships, weapons free, engage. The human fleet opened fire, and the galaxy learned what real war looked like. The dreadnoughts fired first, their railguns accelerating tungsten rods to a fraction of light speed. The projectiles crossed millions of kilometers in seconds, hitting Vorn ships with kinetic energy that turned matter into plasma. Entire enemy vessels simply vanished, converted into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The destroyers followed up with missile salvos. Hundreds of nuclear-tipped warheads streaked across space, their drives burning bright against the darkness. The Council observers watched in horror as the missiles detonated, each one releasing energy equivalent to the bombs that had nearly destroyed Earth centuries ago. But humans had learned to control that destruction, to shape it and aim it with surgical precision. The Vorn tried to respond, launching their own weapons and sending fighters to intercept the human attack. But they were too slow, too disorganized. Point defense lasers created webs of light across space, destroying enemy missiles before they could get close. Human strike craft tore through Vorn fighters, like sharks through schools of fish. On the Indomitable, Jusu watched the battle unfold with cold calculation. "Target the factory ships," she ordered. "Those are the priority." Her ship's main guns rotated, locking onto one of the massive Vorn factory vessels that hung in orbit above Quillari. The factory was converting captured civilians into biomass, processing thousands of lives every minute. Jusu did not hesitate. Fire. The railgun spoke, and the factory ship died. The tungsten rod punched through its hull and detonated the reactors inside. The explosion was so massive that it created a temporary second sun in the Quillari sky. All across the battlespace, human ships performed the same brutal calculus. Identify the target. Calculate the firing solution. Eliminate the threat. There were no warning shots, no attempts at communication. The Vorn had proven they could not be reasoned with. So humanity did what it did best. Lieutenant Ariam Han led Reaper Squadron into the atmosphere, 12 human fighters diving through fire and debris. Her cockpit was cramped and hot, filled with the smell of sweat and recycled air. But she had trained for this her entire adult life. "Reaper flight, targets below," she called over the radio. "Enemy ground forces are still processing civilians in Sector 7. We clear them out." The fighters screamed down through the clouds, their sensors picking up the Vorn ground troops. The enemy was using living harvesting machines, biomechanical horrors that grabbed Quillari civilians and dragged them toward processing centers. Ariam felt her anger rise, cold and focused. Weapons hot. Engage at will. Her fighters' guns opened up, cluster munitions raining down on the Vorn positions. Explosions rippled across the ground, turning the harvesting machines into burning wrecks. Other fighters in her squadron followed up with incendiary weapons, burning everything that the Vorn might use to regenerate. On one of the Council observer ships, Kresh the engineer watched the human attack with something approaching terror. "They are not just fighting," he whispered. "They are exterminating." His captain nodded slowly. "Yes, they have decided the Vorn are a threat. So they are removing that threat completely." Dr. Minji Choi watched the battle from the hospital ship Mercy's Hand, stationed at the edge of the combat zone. She was a xenobiologist by training, specializing in alien cultures and first contact protocols. But today she had a different job: Today she would help save whoever the humans managed to rescue. Medical shuttles were already launching toward the planet's surface, flying through the battle to reach Quillari survivors. Human Marines secured landing zones, while doctors and nurses pulled civilians from the wreckage. Minji had worked with many alien species, but she had never seen the Quillari before. They were amphibious, with large eyes and delicate features. They looked terrified. Through her window, Minji could see the battle continuing in orbit above. Human ships moved like wolves, cutting down the Vorn with ruthless efficiency. She understood now why the other council species feared her people. Humans were not cruel, but they were very, very good at violence. 7 hours after it began, the battle ended. The Vorn collective in the Quillari system had been completely destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped. The human fleet hung in orbit above the saved world, their weapons still hot, their crews exhausted. Fleet Admiral Doyun broadcast to the council observers. The Quillari system is secure. We are beginning rescue and recovery operations. All enemy forces have been eliminated. Eliminated. Not defeated or driven off. Eliminated. The word hung in the air like smoke. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Jisoo Kim allowed herself a moment of weariness. Her crew had performed perfectly, but war always took its toll. Stand down from combat alert, she ordered. Damage report. Minor hits only, Hyon replied. Nothing critical. We lost 3 fighters and 1 destroyer. Total casualties are 47 dead, 93 wounded. Jisoo closed her eyes briefly. 47 of her people who would not go home. But 6 billion Quillari who would. The math was simple, but it never made the loss easier. Send the names to Fleet Command, she said quietly. Make sure their families know they died, saving an entire species. Below them, on the surface of Quillari, survivors emerged from shelters to see their sun for the first time in days. The Vorn were gone. The nightmare was over, and humanity had saved them. But across the galaxy, the Council was asking a different question. If humans could do this to the Vorn, what could they do to us? The recordings spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Council observer ships had transmitted everything, and now 300 species watched humanity at war. They saw the railguns tearing through enemy ships. They saw the nuclear missiles turning space into fields of fire. They saw human fighters diving through hell itself to save people they had never met. And they did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. The Council convened again 3 days after the battle. The great chamber was more crowded than usual, with additional delegates and military advisors filling every available space. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened at Quillari. Everyone wanted to know what humanity truly was. Ambassador Taiyang Park sat in his pod as before, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Before, the other species had looked at him with mild curiosity or polite indifference. Now they looked at him with fear. He cowled. D see it in their eyes, hear it in their whispered conversations. The humans were predators, and predators were dangerous. High Chancellor Riksdahl opened the session with his feathers pressed flat against his body, a sign of extreme stress in his species. We are here to discuss the human military action in the Quillari system, he began. While we are grateful that the Quillari were saved, many questions have been raised about Earth's capabilities and intentions. Questions? Snapped a delegate from the Taurian Confederacy. I have more than questions. I have demands. How many weapons does humanity possess? How many more fleets are hiding in your space? What are Earth's territorial ambitions? Other voices joined in, creating a chorus of fear and anger. Some wanted humanity expelled from the Council immediately. Others wanted restrictions placed on human military expansion. A few brave souls argued that Earth had just saved an entire species and deserved gratitude, but they were drowned out by the majority. Taiyang waited for the noise to die down before standing. High Chancellor, may I address the council? Rick still nodded, though he looked like he wanted to refuse. Please, Ambassador, help us understand. Taiyang took a breath and began. I will answer your questions honestly, because you deserve the truth. Yes, humanity maintains 7 full expeditionary fleets, like the one you saw at Kolari. We also have 12 defensive armadas protecting our core systems. We have weapons that make what you saw at Kolari look primitive. We have enough firepower to sterilize planets or crack them open completely. The chamber erupted again. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, their fear turning to panic. Rick Stahl had to activate the sonic dampeners to restore order. But Taiyang continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. You are asking the wrong questions. You want to know what weapons we have. You should be asking why we have them. We know why, someone shouted. You are conquerors. You build weapons to take what you want. No, Taiyang said firmly. We build weapons because our history taught us what happens when you are not prepared. We build weapons because we learned, through thousands of years of pain, that hope for peace is not enough. You must prepare for war. He gestured, and images appeared in the holographic display. Earth as it had been centuries ago, divided into nations that fought constantly. Cities destroyed by weapons that humanity had built and used on itself. Then the images shifted, showing Earth united, looking outward to the stars with hard-won wisdom. We were almost destroyed by our own violence, Taiyang said quietly. We came very close to extinction. But we survived, and we learned. We learned to channel our aggression outward, against threats from outside. We learned to protect instead of conquer. The Quailari are proof of that, are they? Demanded the Taurian delegate. Or are they just the first species you plan to make dependent on you? Before Taiyang could respond, a new voice filled the chamber. May I speak? Everyone turned to see a Quailari delegation entering the chamber. Their species had never attended a council session before. They were too peaceful, too focused on art and philosophy to care about galactic politics. But everything had changed for them in the last week. A Quailari later, a dignified elder named Quail Shara, moved to the speaker's platform. Her large eyes swept across the assembled delegates, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of loss and gratitude. I am Quail Shara, chosen to speak for the Quailari people. We have heard your debate, and we find it strange. You argue about human weapons and human power. You fear what humanity might do. But you seem to have forgotten what humanity did do. She pulled up an image of Quailari before the attack. Beautiful cities, artistic monuments, peaceful communities. Then she showed what the Vorn had done. The ruins, the mass graves. The processing centers where her people had been turned into fuel. The Vorn killed 2 billion of my people before the humans arrived, Quail Shara continued, her voice breaking slightly. They would have killed all 6 billion if Earth had not acted. And when the humans came, they did not ask for payment. They did not demand territory or resources. They fought, they died, and then they helped us rebuild. She turned to face Taiyang directly. Ambassador Park, on behalf of my entire species, I thank you. Humanity saved us when no one else could or would. Yes, your weapons are frightening. Yes, your capacity for violence is disturbing. But that violence was directed at monsters who wanted to consume us. You did what needed to be done. The chamber fell silent. Quail Shara's words hung in the air, a counterpoint to all the fear and suspicion. Dr. Minji Choi, watching from the human delegation pod, felt tears in her eyes. This was why they did it. This was why humans maintained their weapons and trained for war. Not to conquer, but to protect. Another delegate stood, this one from the Valine Empire. The Quailari have reason to be grateful, but that does not address our concerns. What happens the next time? What if humanity decides that another species is a threat? Captain Jisoo Kim appeared in the holographic display, broadcasting from the Indomitable which still orbited Quailari. Then we would be no better than the Vorn, she said bluntly, and we would deserve whatever punishment the Council decided to give us. You say that now, the Veline delegate pressed, but you have the power to ignore us. You have the power to do whatever you want. Yes, Jisoo agreed. We do, but power is not the same as right. We could conquer you all if we wanted to. The fact that we choose not to should tell you something about who we are. Commander Hyan Lai, standing beside his captain on the bridge, added his own perspective. Our weapons exist to protect our allies, not threaten them. But we will not apologize for being prepared. The Vorn proved that threats exist in this galaxy. Real threats that cannot be negotiated with or wished away. Someone needs to be ready to fight them. Rickstull raised a wing for attention. That is precisely what concerns us, Captain. You say you will protect your allies, but that creates a hierarchy. Species that align with Earth will be safe. Species that do not will be vulnerable. You are creating a system where everyone must choose between being with humanity or against it. Tai Yang shook his head. No, Chancellor. You are creating that system by refusing to defend yourselves. We offered to help the Quailari as equals, not as subjects. We will offer the same to any species that faces similar threats. But we will not force protection on anyone who does not want it. And if we ask you to reduce your military forces? Asked another delegate. Would you comply? No, Tai Yang said simply. We will not disarm. We cannot disarm. Our history has taught us that lesson too well. But we will operate within Council law in all other matters. We will respect your sovereignty and your choices. What we will not do is pretend that the galaxy is safer than it actually is. The debate continued for hours, going in circles as different species voiced their fears and concerns. Some suggested that humanity should be expelled from the Council. Others proposed restrictions on human military operations. A few brave souls argued that Earth should be welcomed as a protector. But no consensus emerged. Finally, Rickstull called for a vote on whether to expel humanity from the Council. The result was close, but decisive. 167 species voted to keep Earth as a member. 133 voted for expulsion. Humanity would remain, but the Council was deeply divided. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Dr. Minji approached Quail Shara. The Quailari leader looked exhausted, still recovering from the trauma her species had endured. Thank you for speaking on our behalf, Minji said softly. You did not have to do that. Quail Shara's large eyes focused on the human doctor. Yes, I did. Your people saved mine. But more than that, I spoke because I understand something that many others do not. They see your weapons and fear you. But I see what those weapons protected. I see the doctors who worked for days without rest to save our wounded. I see the Marines who risked their lives to pull our children from burning buildings. I see humanity's heart, not just its fists. She reached out and gently touched Minji's hand. You are predators, yes. But you are predators who have chosen to guard the prey. That is worth more than all the weapons in your fleet. Minji returned to the human pod where Tai Yang waited. The ambassador looked tired, older than his years. How did I do? He asked quietly. You told them the truth, Minji replied. Whether they accept it or not is up to them. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Jisoo and Hyan watched the council feed end. They fear us, Hyan observed. Of course they do, Jisoo replied. We showed them a side of existence they had forgotten. We reminded them that the universe can be cruel and that survival requires strength. That is a hard lesson for species that have known only peace. Do you think they will come around? Jisoo looked out at the stars, thinking about all the battles she had fought, all the lives she had taken and saved. Some will not. But that is not what worries me. What does? The Vorn, Jisoo said quietly. They came from somewhere. This was just a probe, a test. The real threat is still out there, and now they know we exist. They know we can hurt them, which means they will come back stronger next time. In the darkness of space, beyond the edge of explored territory, something moved. The Vorn Collective processed the data FR, owned their lost probe force, analyzing the species that had destroyed them. These humans were dangerous, efficient killers who understood war. They would require a different approach. The collective grew and planned. Next time, they would not underestimate the prey. Next time, they would bring everything. 3 months passed after the Battle of Quillari. The galaxy tried to return to normal, but everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same. The Council remained divided over humanity, with some species maintaining friendly relations while others kept their distance. Earth continued its military patrols, watching the edges of known space with careful attention. Captain Jisoo Kim stood in her quarters aboard the Indomitable, reviewing reports from her crew. They had been on patrol for 6 weeks, moving along the frontier between Council space and the unexplored regions beyond. It was quiet work, boring even, but someone had to watch the darkness. Someone had to make sure the Vorn did not return. Her console beeped with an incoming message. Commander Hyun's face appeared on the screen, and Jisoo could see the tension in his expression immediately. Captain, you need to see this. We are picking up something on long-range sensors. Jisoo was on the bridge in under a minute. The tactical display showed a section of space beyond the frontier, the area where the Vorn probe had originally emerged. And there, moving through the darkness like a tide of nightmares, was something that made even her experienced crew fall silent. How many? She asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Current count is over 1 million vessels, Hyun replied quietly. And it is still growing. Captain, this is not another probe. This is the main Vorn Collective. Jisoo felt ice settle in her stomach. 1 million ships. The force that attacked Quillari had numbered only 3,000, and it had taken everything the Third Fleet had to destroy them. This was not a battle force. This was an extinction event. Send the data to Fleet Command immediately, she ordered. Emergency priority. Then get me Ambassador Park. Within hours, the information reached every corner of Council space. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Panic spread like disease. Some species began evacuation procedures. Others locked down their borders and refused all outside contact. A few simply froze, unable to process the scale of the threat bearing down on them. The Council convened an emergency session. This time, there were no debates about procedure or diplomatic protocols. Everyone understood that they were looking at the end of everything they knew. High Chancellor Rickstill stood before the assembled delegates, his feathers gray with stress. The human analysis suggests we have less than 1 year before the Vorn Collective reaches our core systems. Every military simulation we have run shows the same result. Complete defeat. Total extinction. Unless something changes, the Council will cease to exist. The chamber was silent, except for the sound of translation devices humming. Admiral Do-yoon appeared in the holographic display, his expression grave. High Chancellor, the human fleets are ready to fight. All 7 expeditionary fleets and our defensive armadas will deploy to meet the enemy. But I must be honest with you. Even with everything we have, the odds are not good. We are badly outnumbered. Then what do we do? Someone cried out. How do we survive? Senator Hugh Lim stepped forward from the human delegation. He was a civilian leader from Earth, sent specifically to address this crisis. "You learn to fight," he said bluntly. "You stop relying on humanity to save you and start defending yourselves." "Impossible," declared the Taurian delegate. "We are not warriors. We do not have the culture or the training or the weapons." "Then you will die," Hugh replied without emotion. "Those are your options. Learn to fight or face extinction. Earth will help you, but we cannot do it alone." Dr. Minji stepped up beside the senator, carrying data chips that she distributed to the various delegations. "We have prepared training programs," she explained. "Military doctrine, tactical procedures, weapons design, everything you need to build defensive forces. It will be difficult. It will require you to change your cultures in ways that may be uncomfortable. But it is possible." Colonel Yunha Yu, a human military attaché, added her perspective. "We have analyzed your species' capabilities. Many of you have advantages that humans lack. Better reflexes, enhanced senses, natural armor, technological superiority in certain fields. You simply never thought to apply these advantages to warfare. We can teach you how." Quail Shara, who had stayed on as an observer after the attack on her world, stood to speak. "My people have already begun training with human instructors. It is hard. Many of us struggle with the concept of violence. But we will never again be helpless while our people die. We will stand with humanity, and we will fight." Her words created ripples across the chamber. If the Qualari, the most peaceful species anyone knew, were willing to become warriors, what did that say about the severity of the threat? "This is asking us to abandon everything we are," protested a delegate from the Pelian Empire. "Our entire civilization is built on peace and cooperation. You want us to become killers." Lieutenant Ariam Han appeared in the display, still wearing her flight suit from a recent training exercise. "No one is asking you to become killers," she said. "We are asking you to become protectors. There is a difference. Human history is full of violence, yes, but it is also full of people who stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. That is what we are offering to teach you." Ambassador Taiyang took the floor, and his voice carried the weight of Earth's decision. "The Shared Shield Initiative is humanity's proposal. We will share our military technology and training with any species willing to defend themselves and their neighbors. We will lead the combined defense of Council space, but only if you are willing to stand beside us." "And what will this cost us?" asked a suspicious delegate. "Nothing," Taiyang replied, "except your fear and your pride. We do not want payment or territory or political power. We want allies. We want a galaxy that can defend itself instead of waiting for someone else to save it." The debate that followed was intense, but shorter than expected. The Vorn Collective was coming, and everyone could see the timeline. They had months, not years. Choices had to be made quickly. 53 species volunteered immediately. The Quailari, as promised, were first. Others followed, species that had seen the recordings of the battle and understood what was at stake. Some of them were afraid. Many of them doubted whether they could truly become warriors. But they were willing to try. 47 species refused. They could not or would not change their fundamental nature, even facing extinction. Some chose evacuation, planning to flee beyond the Vorn's reach. Others simply accepted their fate with quiet dignity. Humanity respected their choice, though it hurt to know that billions would die because of it. The remaining 200 species were undecided, waiting to see if the training worked, if peaceful species could truly learn to fight. Captain Jisoo was assigned to lead the training of the Villain Empire's forces. She stood in a hangar bay on their homeworld, looking at the volunteers who had gathered. They were crystalline beings, beautiful and fragile in appearance. None of them had ever held a weapon. Most had never even seen violence in person. "Why are you here?" she asked them directly. A young Valine stepped forward. His name was Kresh, the same engineer who had observed the Battle of Quellari. "Because we saw what you did for the Quellari," he said. "Because someone needs to stand against the darkness. Because we do not want to die as victims." Jisoo nodded slowly. "Then we begin. But understand this. I will push you harder than you have ever been pushed. I will make you do things that go against every instinct you have. Some of you will quit. Some of you will hate me. But those who make it through will be able to protect your people. Is that worth it?" "Yes," Kresh replied, and the others echoed him. The training began across dozens of worlds. Human instructors worked with alien volunteers, teaching them everything from basic weapons handling to advanced tactical theory. It was hard, often brutal work. Many aliens struggled with the concept of violence, finding it difficult to overcome their peaceful natures. Major Seok Bay led the Marine training program on the Quellari homeworld. He watched as Quellari civilians learned to move under fire, to operate weapons, to think like soldiers instead of artists. It was painful to watch them lose their innocence, but he knew it was necessary. "You are doing well," he told a group after a particularly difficult exercise. "I know this is hard for you, but remember why you are here. Remember what the Vorn did to your people. That memory will keep you sharp." One of the Quellari, a young female named Sella, approached him after the session. "Instructor Seok, may I ask a question?" "Of course. How do humans do it? How do you live with violence as part of your nature? How do you keep from becoming monsters?" Seok was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "We remember what we protect," he finally said. "We never forget that the purpose of our strength is to shield others. And we help each other carry the weight. No one should bear this burden alone." The months passed quickly. The combined fleets began to take shape, integrating human and alien vessels into cohesive fighting forces. It was messy and complicated, with constant communication issues and cultural misunderstandings. But slowly, impossibly, it started to work. Fleet Admiral Do Yun stood in the command center of the Eternal Vigil, watching status reports from across the training zones. Ships were being refitted with human weapons. Crews were learning human tactics. Entire species were transforming themselves into something they had never been before. Beside him, High Chancellor Rickstall watched the same displays. The avian leader had changed in the months since the Quellari crisis. His feathers were still gray, but his eyes had become harder, more determined. "Do you think we can win?" Rickstall asked quietly. "I think we can fight," Do Yun replied. "And sometimes that is enough. The Vorn expect easy prey. They expect to consume us without resistance. We are going to surprise them, and if we lose, then we lose fighting. But at least we will not die as victims." The Vorn Collective continued its approach, unaware that the galaxy was preparing a reception very different from what they expected. They had fed on countless species, consumed entire civilizations without meaningful resistance. They did not understand at this time. The prey had learned to bite back. The day arrived when sensors across Council space began screaming warnings. The Vorn Collective had reached the edge of explored territory, their massive swarm blotting out the stars themselves. Over 1 million ships moved with terrible purpose toward the heart of galactic civilization. They expected to find the same helpless prey they had always encountered. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The combined defense fleet gathered at a carefully chosen location, a system with 3 gas giants and an asteroid field that human tacticians believed could be used to their advantage. Captain Jisoo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, but she was no longer just a ship captain. Fleet Admiral Do-yun had given her command of the entire combined fleet strike element, integrating human and alien vessels into a single fighting force. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. Commander Hyan coordinated with the alien ships, translating human tactical orders into formats that dozens of different species could understand. Lieutenant Nari managed communications, keeping thousands of vessels connected and informed. And Chief Engineer Junho monitored the reactor, ready to give the captain every ounce of power she might need. On dozens of other bridges across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Alien crews stood beside human advisors, preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Some were confident. Many were terrified. All were determined. Lieutenant Ariam sat in her fighter's cockpit, now leading a mixed squadron of human and Veline pilots. The Veline had taken to flight naturally, their crystalline bodies giving them enhanced reaction times that made them excellent pilots once they overcame their fear of combat. Beside her fighter floated a Veline craft, piloted by Kresh, the engineer who had become one of the best students in the training program. Reaper led, "This is Crystal 3, Kresh transmitted. "I am ready." "All squadrons report ready," Ariam confirmed. "Remember your training. Stay with your wingmen. Watch each other's backs. And do not try to be a hero." On the ground, Major Seok Bey prepared his mixed marine units for potential boarding actions. Qualari soldiers checked their weapons alongside human troops, both species armored and ready for close combat. Sella, the young Qualari who had asked how humans lived with violence, was now a sergeant, responsible for leading her own squad. Nervous? Seok asked her. Terrified, she admitted, but also angry. "They came to my world and killed my family. Now we stop them from doing that to anyone else." Seok nodded with approval. "Good. Hold on to that. Fear keeps you sharp. Anger gives you strength. Use them both." In the command center of the Eternal Vigil, Fleet Admiral Do-yun stood beside High Chancellor Rickstow. The avian leader had requested to be present for the battle, wanting to witness firsthand what his people and their allies were about to do. Around them, holographic displays showed the entire battlefield. Thousands of friendly vessels preparing to meet millions of enemies. "They outnumber us 10 to 1, Rickstow observed quietly. "Yes," Do-yun agreed, "but numbers are not everything. The Vorn rely on overwhelming force and regeneration. They have never faced coordinated resistance, never adapted to enemies who fight back effectively. That is their weakness, and we are going to exploit it. And if we are wrong, then we die. But we die on our feet, fighting for everything we love. That is better than dying on our knees." The Vorn fleet entered the system, their ships moving in vast swarms that defied conventional tactics. They did not form battle lines or coordinate their approach. They simply came forward like a wave, expecting to wash over and consume everything in their path. Do-yun waited until they were committed, until their forward elements were deep into the system and separated from the main body. Then he gave the order that would begin the largest battle in galactic history. "All ships, execute battle plan Aurora. Show them what a united galaxy can do." The human ships opened fire first, their railguns and missiles creating lanes of destruction through the Vorn formations. But this time, they were not alone. Veline vessels used their superior shielding technology to advance into close range, their beam weapons slicing through enemy hulls. Qualari ships deployed weapons based on their water manipulation technology, using high-pressure jets to tear apart Vorn biomechanical structures. Dozens of other species contributed their own unique capabilities, each one finding ways to hurt the enemy. The Vorn tried to respond with their usual tactics, sending waves of smaller ships to overwhelm the defenders. But they flew directly into a trap. Human destroyers had seeded the asteroid field with mines, And as the Vorn swarms pursued fleeing scout ships into the field, the explosions began. Thousands of enemy vessels were destroyed in the first few minutes. On the Indomitable's bridge, Jisoo watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. "Target the command nodes," she ordered. "Intelligence suggests the Vorn use biological coordination centers. We cut those off. Their formations lose cohesion." Humans strike craft, and their alien squadrons dove into the enemy fleet, hunting for the larger vessels that seemed to direct the swarms around them. Arium led Reaper Squadron through walls of fire, her mixed team working together with a coordination that would have been impossible months ago. "Crystal 3, you have fighters on your tail," she called to Kresh. "I see them." Reaper led, engaging. The Veline pilot spun his craft in a maneuver no human could survive. The G-forces that would crush organic flesh, meaning nothing to his crystalline body. His weapons spoke, and the pursuing Vorn fighters exploded. "Good kill," Arium confirmed. "Reform on me." "We have a command node at bearing 274. The battle raged for hours, spreading across the entire system. The Vorn had never encountered resistance like this before. Their numbers were still overwhelming, but the combined fleet used every tactical advantage they could find. Human weapons killed at long range. Alien technology provided shields and sensors that humanity lacked. Together, they created something greater than either could achieve alone. Major, Seox Marines boarded a Vorn factory ship that had been disabled by fleet weapons. What they found inside was nightmare fuel, processing centers still full of captured civilians from a dozen species. But this time, there were soldiers ready to save them. "Clear each section carefully," Seok ordered. "Watch for regenerating enemies. And get those people out." Sela led her Quillari squad through the twisted corridors, her weapon ready. When they found a group of Vorn harvesters still active, she did not hesitate. Her squad opened fire, and the enemy went down. Months ago, the idea of killing anything would have been unthinkable to her. Now, it was necessary. They found survivors, terrified civilians who had expected to die. Sela helped a young child, barely older than her own sibling had been before the attack on their world. "You are safe now," she told them gently. "We are here. You are safe." On the Eternal Vigil, Dr. Minji coordinated the medical response, directing hospital ships to pick up wounded from both sides of the battle. She had spent months teaching alien medical teams how to treat combat injuries, and now that training was being put to the test. Casualties were high, but the survival rate was far better than any simulation had predicted. "Doctor, we have wounded Veline coming in," a nurse called. "Their physiology is reacting badly to explosive decompression. Switch them to the crystalline resonance chambers," Minji ordered, "and get me their physiological data. We will figure this out." The battle reached its critical point 6 hours in. The Vorn Collective, despite their losses, was still pushing forward through sheer numbers. The combined fleet had fought brilliantly, but they were running out of ammunition and energy. Ships reported critical damage. Fighter squadrons were down to half strength. The line was starting to buckle. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Hyan looked up from his console with worry in his eyes. "Captain, we cannot hold much longer. The reserves are depleted." Jisoo studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage she could exploit. The Vorn were still pouring in, but their formation had become chaotic. The destruction of their command nodes had left them disorganized, each ship fighting independently instead of as a coordinated swarm. "That is their weakness," she said suddenly. "They are not adapting. They are just pushing forward blindly. We use that." She opened a channel to Fleet Admiral Doyen. "Admiral, request permission to execute a fighting retreat. We pull back through the gas giants and use the gravity wells to separate their formations further." Make them chase us through terrain that favors coordinated units over swarms. Dao Yun considered for only a moment. Permission granted. All ships begin phased withdrawal. Make them work for every kilometer. The combined fleet began to fall back, but it was not a rout. It was a carefully controlled retreat, ships covering each other as they pulled back through the system. The Vorn followed, thinking they were winning, not realizing they were being led into another trap. Human engineers had spent weeks preparing the gas giants, seeding their atmospheres with weapons that could be remotely activated. As the Vorn swarms dove after the retreating fleet, those weapons came online. Nuclear devices detonated deep within the giant planets, creating massive storms and electromagnetic pulses that tore through the enemy formations. More importantly, it bought time. Time for ships to rearm and repair. Time for reinforcements to arrive from the rear. Time for the combined fleet to catch its breath and prepare for the next phase. The battle lasted 3 days in total. When it finally ended, the Vorn Collective had been dealt a devastating blow. They had lost over 300,000 ships, and their advance had been stopped completely. The combined fleet had suffered heavy losses as well, but they had survived. More importantly, they had proven that the galaxy could defend itself. In the aftermath, Captain Jisoo walked through the Indomitable's corridors, visiting the wounded and congratulating the survivors. She stopped by the medical bay, where Kresh was being treated for injuries sustained when his fighter took damage. "You fought well," she told the Veline pilot. "Your people should be proud." "I am proud," Kresh replied. 3 months ago, I had never even imagined fighting. Now I have saved lives by taking them. It is strange, but it feels right. Jisoo nodded with understanding. That is the burden warriors carry. But remember, you did not become a killer. You became a protector. There is a difference. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, Fleet Admiral Do Yun and High Chancellor Riksdal watched as the Vorn fleet withdrew, retreating back toward dark space. The enemy had been bloodied, but not destroyed. They would return, stronger and more prepared. "We won," Riksdal said, though his voice carried no triumph. "We survived the first battle," Do Yun corrected gently. "The war is just beginning. But today, we proved something important. We proved that the galaxy can stand together, that peaceful species can learn to fight when they must, that the Council is not helpless prey waiting to be consumed." Riksdal's feathers rustled in what might have been agreement. "We have changed," he said quietly. "My people, all of our people. We are not what we were before humanity arrived." "No," Do Yun agreed. "You are not. You are stronger. You are ready to protect yourselves and each other. That is not a loss, Chancellor. That is evolution." Throughout Council space, the news of the victory spread. Species that had remained neutral began reconsidering their positions. The training programs that had seemed like desperate measures now looked like salvation. More volunteers stepped forward. More species joined the Shared Shield Initiative. Ambassador Taiyang addressed the Council one final time before returning to Earth. "We came to your galaxy 15 years ago," he said. "We were strangers, unknowns, possibly threats. You had every reason to fear us. But when the darkness came, when the Vorn threatened to consume everything, we stood together. Human and alien, predator and prey, warrior and pacifist. We stood together, and we survived." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from 300 species. "The galaxy has changed. You have changed. You can never go back to what you were before. But you do not need to. You are stronger now, ready to face whatever comes from the darkness. And humanity will stand beside you, not as conquerors or overlords, but as allies and friends." The Council stood, all 300 species rising in a gesture of respect and unity that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The chamber filled with the sounds of different languages, different species, all saying the same thing. Thank you. In the command center of the Indomitable. Captain Jesu looked out at the stars and allowed herself a small smile. The battle was over, but the war continued. The Vorn would return. Other threats would emerge from the darkness. But the galaxy was ready now. The prey had learned to fight back. The council stood frozen no longer.